Are they calling these Gemini killings in the papers? You must get them to do that, Lieutenant. It's important.
The Gemini is dead.
No, I am not! I'm alive! I go on! I breathe!
Hello, welcome back to Ycft. Today we are talking about The Exorcist, but not the original. We've jumped straight to
the best one.
Exorcist 3. You gotta show your hand early. We've made it clear in the channel before, The Exorcist isn't one of our favourite films.
No.
I like it, appreciate it, but I never find myself watching. In fact, I bought this Blu-ray well over a year ago. I'm pretty sure I bought that in prep for Exorcist Believer coming out, but then we never went to go see it. So I only took the cellophane off it today.
Today.
Today. But we felt inspired recently to start watching some of the Exorcist sequels. So we watched Exorcist 2.
The Heretic.
That was an experience.
Yes.
Most of the special features on this one are just various different cast and crew shitting on Exorcist 2.
Yeah, no, literally.
Brad Dourif does not like Exorcist 2.
I don't think anyone despises Exorcist 2 more than Brad Dourif.
Except maybe Friedkin. The director of the original Exorcist, he laughed at it.
Yeah, I know. It's not a good movie. I can confirm.
And it wasn't. It didn't do great. And it wasn't perceived very well. So it took until 1990 for us to get The Exorcist 3, directed by William Peter Blatty, the author of the original film. I'm holding like a little wand here.
Yes.
I made a little ghost candle.
Yeah,
Who's been chilling at you in? You'll be in several videos, but this is the only one where I've decided I'm actually going to light in.
This is a homemade prop.
Yeah. I got enough wax to make one more.
There he goes.
Things he lost a hand coming out of the mold, so
he was injured.
He was injured in the line of duty. Now he's just screaming because he's on fire. Blatty had the idea whilst making the original film with Friedkin in mind to direct.
Yes, he did.
And he said no.
Blatty wanted Friedkin to come on board as a director for the story. Blatty had at that point completed a script. He had a full script completed, and he then decided, upon Friedkin not being able to do the movie or not wanting to do the movie, to turn the script into a novel, which he did. It was called Legion. I think it was published in the early 80s and did very well.
I think if you get the Scream Factory version of the Blu-ray, it's actually called William Peter Blatty's Legion.
Yes, and that was a deliberate move, because I don't think Blatty, when it came to the novel or the film, he didn't really want it tied closely to the original movie, and certainly not the sequel. He very much wanted this to be a standalone entry, not closely tied to the previous iterations.
Yeah, because he only directed 2 movies, didn't he? This was the last movie he directed. The first one was another adaptation of one of his novels.
The 9th Configuration,
yeah, which is also part of the same trilogy of books.
I will say, Blatty, I've not read any of his novels, but he is a stellar director.
Yeah.
He knows what he's doing. This is a very well-made movie.
It really is, and it looks really nice. Like, you can compose a shot really well.
Yeah.
So we're following 2 characters from the original Exorcist, played by different actors.
Yes. So same characters, but recast.
Yeah. Do you want to take us through the core cast?
We have Lieutenant William Kinderman, or Bill Kinderman. He is now played by George C. Scott. And he is investigating a new slew of very grisly murders that are have religious components to them. So the bodies are being decapitated and then positioned in Christ-like poses and positions. A priest is also murdered, also decapitated. And the other character that we have from the first film is Father Joseph Dyer, also recast. And who plays him? Ed Flanders. I will say they have brilliant chemistry together, George C. Scott and Flanders. They have been friends for 15 years since the events of the first film. And it is at the start of Exorcist 3. It's the anniversary of Father Karras's death, the Jason Miller character from the first film. And they meet every year to commemorate their friend's death and sort of reminisce.
They watch It's a Wonderful Life.
Yes. I've seen, one of them says, I've seen it 37 times. And I love that. I love their dialogue together. I love their scenes together. It's really wonderful. But yeah, they meet up on the 15th anniversary of Karras's death, and it also coincides with this new murder investigation that Kinderman is undertaking with these, very grisly murders that resemble the killings of the Gemini killer, also from 15 years ago.
Yeah, who was given the chair. Very much feels inspired by the Zodiac killer.
It was. A little bit of trivia about that. So, yes, the Gemini killer is absolutely inspired by the Zodiac killer. In real life, the Zodiac very famously wrote letters to the San Francisco Chronicle and a bunch of other newspaper outlets. What do you call them? Newspaper outlets? That's wrong.
Yeah, we'll go with outlets.
Let's go with that. He wrote to the press, and in one of his letters, he name-checked The Exorcist as being one of his favourite comedies. Which is something the Beetlejuice also kind of used, weirdly. Yeah. But yeah, the Zodiac actually did mention the film in one of his letters. So I assume Blatty is just kind of like, I don't know, a little inside joke there, maybe with a real life serial killer. Not sure, but yes, was absolutely based on a real life.
Yeah. His friend, the priest, does he have a heart attack?
It's not really explained, I don't think, what happens. Because he actually ends up... It's a psychiatric hospital. It's not really like a general hospital, is it?
There seems to be people that are there for medical conditions, and then people that are there for psychological reasons.
Yes, because there's a lot of old people at the hospital, with the onset of dementia and Alzheimer's.
But you do see a couple of people that just seem to be there for, like I said, heart attacks and stuff, so... Maybe just not enough hospital beds. I
guess not. Anyway, Father Dyer ends up in this hospital.
And again, I just love their relationship. But then things start happening around the hospital whilst this investigation's going on. Ultimately, I think the reason you like this film in particular, because I hadn't seen this until we watched it, and we had no intention of doing a video on it.
No.
We just wanted to watch it. Then we watched it as soon as we did it. We should do a video on this one. So we're going to skip past the first two Exorcist films and go straight to the third one. Because it's our channel, we can do what we want.
Yeah.
It feels like an episode of The X-Files.
Yes, it does.
The way the investigative element works out of it. I can imagine Mulder dealing with the religious sides of it in a very interesting way, along with the clearly supernatural stuff that's going on.
Yeah.
It's absolutely an episode of The X-Files. What's interesting is you can do two cuts of the movie. There's the theatrical, obviously the theatrical cut.
Yes.
That the studio, Morgan Creek.
Yes.
They wanted essentially to tie it a bit more to The Exorcist. Like, Blatty fought heavily against having Exorcist 3 be the title, just because it incorporates the second one. He wanted to be called Legion. Or even, I think at one point, Exorcist 1990 was a title they were working on. He didn't want 3 in the title. Apparently a lot of the footage was either lost or destroyed. Not long before he died, a copy of the closest thing we could get to a director's cut, which is often called either the director's cut or the Legion director's cut,
yes,
has been assembled. And similar to when we did a Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, the reassembled scenes are just VHS scenes.
Just dailies.
So you can...
So very poor quality.
Very, very, very poor quality. And some scenes they've just interspliced with the equivalent from the reshoots.
Yeah. To
try and build out this. It's not entirely his vision, but it's the closest that we would have got. So he did see a copy of that before he passed away.
Yeah.
We have both of them on here. So for this, we have watched both cuts of the film. And I like both of them.
Yeah.
To be perfectly honest, for different reasons. But in the director's cut, there's a lot more talking, a lot more conversations between our two main characters. In particular, like the revelation that George C. Scott's character is Jewish.
Yeah, that's the scene that was cut away in the theatrical.
Yeah, which I find that interesting considering the Catholicism that he is surrounded by through the entirety of this film.
Yeah.
I just found that quite interesting.
It is interesting.
And the fact that one of his best friends is a Catholic priest.
He's a Catholic priest. I also love that the priest that we see in this film, Dyer especially, is a very, very cynical priest. Like he calls kids weirdos.
Yeah.
And he drinks and he smokes and it's like kind of offhand with his assistant in the church in that first scene that we see him in. I really like that. Blatty, who was a Catholic himself, who genuinely believed in these things that he was directing and writing about, still had a bit of a cynical sense of humour. Yeah. And I absolutely appreciate that. I think Blatty was a very interesting man.
Yeah.
But yes, there's a lot of really good moments in the director's cut. And I don't know, now that I've seen them twice, I kind of oscillate between which one is my favourite. But I think I am leaning towards the director's cut.
Yeah. So the main difference is being that the openings are different. There's certain bits of dialogue scenes that are taken out, but the ending was completely reshot.
A big difference as well, the director's cut, the Gemini killer, or Patient X, whatever you want to call it, the villain, is Brad Dourif. From beginning to end, it's Brad Dourif, who was sensational.
He should have got awards. Even his performance in the theatrical cut is outstanding. Like, how did Brad Dourif never win an Oscar? I know he was nominated, but man, anytime I see him, he is so good.
He is mesmerizing in this. Like, no one can monologue like Brad Dourif.
Even in the low quality dailies that we were watching in the director's cut, I'm watching him. It's like I can't look away.
He is phenomenal
from his monologues.
He is truly one of the greatest actors I think that we've ever had, and is he underrated?
I think he's underappreciated.
Underappreciated. I don't think enough people know the name Brad Dourif. But anyway, yes, the Legion director's cut, it's Brad Dourif. The theatrical cut, Dourif scenes are shared or paired, I guess, with Jason Miller. Now that is a whole saga in and of itself.
Yeah. Should we explain as much as we can about why?
As much as we can, because it is a bit confusing.
Patient X is assumed to be this killer that was executed 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Or the Gemini killer. What's the character's actual name?
James Veneman.
He is meant to have a striking resemblance to Father Karras.
Yes.
Which is why George C. Scott, whose character... I keep calling him by the actor's name again. What's he called?
Bill Kinderman.
It's why Kinderman is so, off-put by him and curious about him is because he has a resemblance to his friend.
Who died 15 years ago.
Who died 15 years ago, falling down the famous set of stairs.
Look at me! Look at me! And tell me what you see!
I see a man who looks like Davian Karras.
I have to admit, watching that, if you watched just the director's cut, that would have confused me a little bit.
It confused the hell out of me.
And I do think the theatrical cut deals with that better. So shall I spoil what?
Yes.
So what happened was...
The master. And he thought that my work should continue in this body. In this body in particular, in fact.
As the Gemini killer was executed, is around the same time that Father Karras was pushed down the stairs. Mm-hmm. And Pazuzu, whose name does not appear in the director's cut at all, I think it appears once in the theatrical cut, if I'm remembering correctly, basically took the spirit of the Gemini killer, shoved him into Father Karras' body as punishment. So Father Karras is basically a backseat driver of his own dead body with the mind of this serial killer, the spirit of this serial killer running.
Yes.
Let's call it revenge. A certain matter of an exorcism, I think, in which your friend Father Karras expelled certain parties from the body of a child.
The last person to see him, this priest who, did the rites, put him in his coffin. He bursts out the coffin. We don't see this, and then this priest then dies of a heart attack, specifically his third heart attack.
Yes.
And puts his body in the coffin, and he wants to get buried. So when they dig him up, they realize that that's not Father Karras.
No.
But then, because of the lack of oxygen to the brain, his mind was so gone, basically, the Gemini killer was just wandering around. I have no idea who he is, and that's how he ended up in this psych ward for dangerous patients for the next 15 years while he's slowly been essentially rebuilding his brain.
Yeah.
Because when the new killing started, that is essentially when he started to show signs of being alive again. So he's meant to look like Father Karras, and that was part of the investigative thing. Is like, could this be Father Karras? And I think, just with it being recast to Brad Dourif for the original cut of the film, that is a bit confusing.
I had to pause it and research because it is confusing. There's a moment where Kinderman goes to cell 11 the first time he's going to meet the patient X. And he goes into the cell, and this is the director's cut, and he sees Brad Dourif, and he immediately exits, and he's flustered. And we then learn it's because he thinks that Brad Dourif is his old friend Father Karras. And I had to pause it, and I was like, well, why does he think that? Because Brad Dourif doesn't look anything like Jason Miller. It's like, Kinderman, what are you doing? And then it just it dawned on me that actually we're not meant to look too much into that in the director's cut, because Jason Miller unfortunately wasn't available at that point. We are just meant to believe that Brad Dourif is Jason Miller, essentially. That they are one and the same. They look the same. That is the same person. And that is why Kinderman was so startled. The theatrical cut, when they could get Jason Miller, it does make a bit more sense how it oscillates between Dourif and Miller. That Kinderman is actually seeing his old friend.
Yeah.
And that, it does make it a bit clearer. The reason that Miller kind of came and went is because initially, I guess even before they started filming, Blatty did want Jason Miller in the role. Unfortunately, Jason Miller, he was a bit too... He wasn't in good health. I think...
He was an alcoholic, wasn't he?
Alcohol problems. He couldn't remember his lines. He just... He couldn't do it. So they cast Brad Dourif in the role, who fucking nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. And I think completed all of his scenes, if I'm getting that right. But then what happened was Morgan Creek then said, we want more ties to the first film. We want Jason Miller. They were insistent on it. So they were actually willing at that point to get rid of Brad Dourif entirely.
Yeah,
just
they did.
Scratch all of his scenes and just get Jason Miller in to redo all of it. They managed to get Jason Miller, but he couldn't do all of those scenes. It's very heavy monologue scenes.
Yeah, he just couldn't.
Pages and pages of dialogue. It was too much for him. So they kind of compromised where they got Miller in for a few scenes. Yeah. But then they used footage of Dourif.
No, they reshot a lot of it.
They reshot.
Yeah, because the cell.
That was it.
The cell he's in, it goes from like this, what looks like a medieval torture chamber to a more classical like hospital chamber. Yeah. So they had to bring him back to redo a lot of his scenes again in this new setting.
Yeah.
Which I'd have to say, the new room, just the lighting on it, it looks really nice.
I think we saw an interview done with Brad Dourif. He was talking about it, and I think he basically said that Blatty was he was upset about the whole situation because, yes, Blatty originally wanted Miller, accepted that Miller couldn't do it, was very happy with the performance Brad Dourif did. So it wasn't Blatty that wanted to just overwrite Brad Dourif's performance. Yeah. It was the production company. But essentially, the production company kind of had to go crawling back to Brad Dourif, being like, actually, we kind of need you. So I think Brad Dourif set a few requisites, didn't he?
He said he doesn't remember... He's not good at remembering his lines. It takes him a long time. Yeah. So he said, he needs a PA. Yeah. You have to fly him out, and they have to get him a hotel for a couple of days so he can just run lines with this PA. Yes. To get all that back. Yes. And probably, I'm going to imagine, a bit of extra money as well. Probably. It is... I think we've tried to explain that as well as we can. It is quite messy. It is a bit chaotic. It seems like it was a bit of a chaotic production. Yeah. But that is about the gist of it. So... the two different cuts, the plot doesn't change. It's the same investigation. It's still Kinderman researching these new killings, trying to track down, is the Gemini killer back? Is he possessing the body of Father Karras? It's still not changed. The key difference is one version you have Jason Miller popping up, one version it's purely Brad Dourif. The very end is quite different. And the very end. Brad Dourif prefers the original ending because he has the ability to essentially go into a bit of a trance and control the catatonic patients to do things. And Kinnaman, just spoilers for this 24-year-old, 34-year-old movie? Yeah, 1990. No, hello. Hello. Straight up just shoots him. It's a very blunt ending, and I do like it. I do. I think it works. The theatrical ending is an exorcism. So there was no exorcism in the original version of The Exorcist 3. No. They bring in a priest, which we don't really know. I can't remember, he might have been in one scene leading up to it. Yeah. To perform an exorcism, and it's not going well. I think George C. Scott said, he wouldn't be surprised if the light show they're putting on if Madonna popped up at some point. Because he thought the way that they staged the scene looked like a music video. Yeah. He was not impressed either. So we had snakes coming up from the ground, we had fire, the priest ended up with skin coming off, Justin Riley doing a monologue, screaming while he's stuck to the ceiling. I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy that ending. And I kind of do, because I think technically it looks very good. It's quite exciting. I like both for different reasons. One is very flashy.
One is very subdued and very blunt.
I even don't mind the Jason Miller scenes in there because I do think it makes it clear
what's happening.
What is happening?
It does. It's less confusing.
Like the story behind it is quite sad, but I do quite like it. I do think Jason Miller's doing a good job when he's on screen. It's just you cannot do the monologues that Brad Dourif was doing.
No. Again, there's merit to both of them, but I think I'm leaning more towards the original cut because I can't overstate enough how excellent Brad Dourif truly is in this movie. But I do really like that ending as well. There is just something so final and blunt about it, and I don't know what's going to happen to Kinderman after this. Well, to be fair, in both versions, he does kill the Gemini killer. He does kill Patient X. So, like, again, the ending is kind of the same. It's just the events leading up to it is slightly...
I think another big thing in the director's cut is the Gemini killer wants him to go to the news and wants to say that these killings are Gemini killings. Mm-hmm. I think a big thing that convinces him that he is the Gemini killer. They said when the original killings were going on, they faked certain details to the press about...
To weed out the imposters.
Yeah. It's something to do like which finger they cut off and where he did his carvings, so that when the people would say, "Oh, it's me," they would know.
Yeah.
And Brad Dourif knows.
He's doing it.
He's doing these. Obviously, he knows because it was him. He's doing the killings the way the original Gemini killer would have.
The MO is exactly the same.
Yeah.
So Kinderman knows something is going on here, and to be fair to Kinderman as well, like he does instantly go to that conclusion of, are we thinking this is possession?
Yeah.
What's going on? This has to be the Gemini killer, but we know the Gemini killer is dead.
There's something else that we got from the director's cut was just a few more bits of clarity. Like there's the guy who runs the hospital, who in the original cut of the film.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we see
Dr. Temple.
We see him in his office. He's like rehearsing some lines, like the story of bits about the Gemini killer and when Patient X was brought in and activity. And I saw that as, I think he's just trying to seem important, but he's trying to make sure he has all the details down. So Kinnaman comes into his office and you see he's smoking. Like, I kind of miss smoke.
Chimney.
I miss smoking in films because there's something kind of... I like seeing...
Say cool.
Not going to say cool. I think it gives actors a lot to act with.
Yeah.
That whole thing, we see him like smoking it down the stub and then he spends like a good 15 seconds snubbing it out after he's used it to light the next one straight away. That, to me, tells me so much about this character, rather than they just got a vape out.
It's a very good way of portraying anxiety.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pressure. And it could be so many different things, but it's like just spend so long just snubbing out that cigarette.
Yeah, and then instantly just, putting one out and getting another one, lighting up another one, just instantaneously.
Yeah, it tells us so much more about this current scene than, like I said, if you got a vape out or something like that. That's what I miss about smoking in films. It was always such a good way of showing a character's state.
Yeah.
Now, after a nurse is killed in one of the best... It is the best scene of this movie.
The jump scare.
Oh my god.
We'll jump scare.
Get to that in a second. He is found dead afterwards with a needle in his arm. And that comes across as a bit confusing.
Yeah.
Did
he kill himself?
Didn't kill himself. Did Gemini kill? We know from the director's cut, he was being manipulated by the Gemini killer. He was being threatened that if he didn't do these things, bad things would happen. That kind of explains how he's been getting out of his cell a bit as well.
Yeah. Temple was basically tasked by Patient X, or, the Gemini killer, to bring Kinderman to the hospital somehow.
So it was all set up.
Yeah, it's all been set up.
After one of his staff was killed in an extreme brutal way. Again, what I like is, because the first Exorcist, it's all there's a lot of show. There's a lot of we see horrific things happening to this young girl. We don't see what happens to these characters, but we were told what happens.
There's no
she was split down the middle, and sewn with her organs taken out, and her insides filled with rosary beads and sewn back up again. Temple takes his own life after that, and we know from the director's cut that was because of guilt. It's so much clearer because Brad Dourif literally tells us
what happened.
Yeah. Taking those scenes of Brad Dourif explaining it out makes it just come across as a bit weird. It just doesn't make sense.
It threw me. Both versions have confused me for different reasons.
Yeah. But watching them both so close together, gives you a much more complete picture.
Yes, absolutely. Which is an odd way to, watch, to take in a story. I suppose, having two versions.
It's like you shouldn't have to watch two cuts of a film.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that I know a couple of my friends, one of my friends in particular, loves Blade Runner. I think it's okay. I appreciate it, but I also don't think I have to watch 4 different versions of the film to get the full story.
No.
4 different cuts of it, and that's the issue. It is kind of an issue I have here. I shouldn't have to watch 2 different cuts of a film to get what to me is vital information.
I agree.
Because there's details about him coming back and what happens to the priest as well. That's also not in
No, exactly.
the original film. Even just little character details, like Kinnaman being Jewish.
Yeah.
Unless I've completely missed that being in the theatrical cut, but I don't remember that being in there.
No, I think it was just from the director's cut because the footage looked like it was...
Yeah,
rough.
unless it was replaced with something different. Even before seeing this film, I knew this scene. I knew the scene with the nurse.
Yeah.
Because it always pops up as like one of those, top 100 scares.
It is.
It's so prolonged. We see it. We're watching this one. We have this one camera angle looking down this hallway. We can see like the little nurse's station. She goes into one room where you think something bad's going to happen, and doesn't. Just kind of just wakes up a patient. He has a bit of a go. Goes back into the corridor, following that same angle. Goes over to the desk, and there's like dead space on the left side. Something's going to come from the father's room, which is empty now because he is dead. Mm-hmm. Like again, the description of what happened to him is. He had his head taken off, but he was alive beforehand, and it had all of his blood drained.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't think we've made it clear that Father Dyer is actually murdered in the hospital.
In the hospital.
Yeah.
Then we have security guards that are coming out. They kind of chat to her. They go off. She goes up to the room, goes in, comes out, and then did they call it the Angel of Death?
Oh, I don't know.
I think that's what it's called. Storms out, like all hooded, robed, using these here, which are a fictional device used for cracking bones, used for chopping bones.
Shears, essentially.
The shears. Just fall with big noise. Camera zooms in, and that's it. That's how the scene ends. It cuts to a decapitated statue, which you can always see, which always creeped you out, didn't it? We'd seen this decapitated statue several times.
The Jesus statue, yeah, decapitated Jesus. It just, I don't know, it gets me.
That scene was fantastic.
It's truly one of the best for so many reasons. First of all, the camera is pretty static throughout that entire sequence. So we're kind of just watching this very, ultimately mundane sequence of events play out, like this nurse going from her station to going into rooms, like filing paperwork, whatever. We know, as you say, we know something is going to happen, but she is safe. Because we know there are people around her. 2 seconds ago, she was literally talking to a policeman. There's another doctor or a nurse who's having a little nap in a room close by. There are people around her. She should be safe. She emerges from the room that apparently has no danger in because surely she would have spotted it. And it is so jarring to see this really tall, hooded figure just in position with the shears, who just it's so close behind her as well. It just is so jarring. It just comes out of nowhere, and it's perfect because I don't need to see the gore. I don't need to see the aftermath. I don't need to see the bisected body.
You know what has happened.
That scene alone is terrifying. And also, just going back to the Jesus statue, there's a lot of really eerie imagery in this movie. A lot of it is Jesus. I think that the reason that the decapitated Jesus statue really gets to me is because none of the characters acknowledge it. It's we see characters walk past it a lot of times. No one talks about how Jesus is missing his head. There's a scene at the beginning of the movie, I think this is in both versions, where a Jesus figurine in a church opens his eyes. And that, to me, is really haunting as well. There's a religious figurine in the church that Kinderman goes to visit when he's trying to get advice from the priest, asking about, views on possession. And it turns into the Joker.
Yeah.
The Joker from the Batman. It's just, like, the religious clothes and everything is there. It's just the face.
I think Blatty specifically said to the production he wanted it to be a Joker.
Yeah. And there's no explanation for it. It's just there. Just see it, and we take it in, and it's okay. Like, it's just unnerving because, again, like, there's no acknowledgement of it. There's no explanation.
Can I shout out the production design for a second?
Yeah.
Because they did some really ingenious stuff with a lot of the corridors. They wanted to do, like, long corridors. And how they did it was they have the full-size room, and then as the corridor goes on, they would get subtly smaller and smaller to give this corridor this really bizarre-looking shape. And they just have shorter cast members as the scene goes, like, further and further back. It just looks really cool. Obviously, you could just make long corridors, but I think having them shrink, it really makes the room you're in feel large. And when we see... It's not quite heaven, is it? Kinnaman, he has a dream or a vision filled with the dead waiting to move on to the next place, and we see angels. And they did that as well. Like, a lot, like, I think they was in this, like, massive factory with half-made pillars that the matte painting artist would fill in, and just made it seem like it's going back for miles.
That sequence, let's just linger on that for a minute, because the first time I watched the movie, well, I had seen this movie many years ago, and I always remembered certain elements of it, and I remember thinking Exorcist 3 is my favourite of the Exorcist movies, but I couldn't remember that sequence. And then when we rewatched it together, you know, the other month, I was just struck by A, how unusual it is, B, how beautiful it actually is. Yeah, it's a dream/vision sequence of Kinderman walking through what kind of looks like a train station filled with dead people who are being treated or comforted by angels, and the angels look like archetypal angels, you know, like in the white cloak and the huge feathered angel wings.
You have some angels that are just playing jazz.
You've got angels that are playing jazz. You've got old people. You've got young people. I love the moment where you have a woman who's talking on what looks like a radio, and she's saying, "Hello, Earth? Yes, we are trying to communicate. Hello." You know, like the dead trying to communicate with the living. Which we see that in the hospital too. Some of the old senile patients are talking to the radio. So it's like, are they actually communicating with the dead? We'll never know. But the whole sequence is really eerily beautiful, because the first victim of this new string of Gemini killings is a 12-year-old boy called Thomas Kintry, who we learned was decapitated. Well, he was injected with something to paralyze him effectively, and he was cut, and he was decapitated and posed in a Christ-like position.
It's one of the things that made him suspect that
the Gemini's back.
Not necessarily that Gemini's back, that it could be someone within a hospital. There's something that could just be taken off like a medicine cart.
Yes. But yeah, Kinderman's walking through the station, seeing the angels and the dead people, and he sees this little boy, and you can see, like, he's had his head reattached, like it's been sewn back on, I guess, in the autopsy or, you know, the post-mortem. And the little boy just goes over to Kinderman, and they hold hands together, and just really jovially, Kinderman's like, "I'm so sorry you were murdered, Thomas."
Lieutenant! How you doing, Lieutenant?
I'm so sorry you were murdered, Thomas. I miss you.
I miss you too.
And the little boy says something like, "Yeah, me too." Or, "Oh, it's okay. Don't worry about it." And it's bizarre. Yeah. It's so bizarre. It's very dream, almost
ethereal.
David Lynch-esque.
Yeah.
It's something, you know, you might think would appear in one of his stories. And then he sees Father dying, he sees his friend.
We have a cameo from Samuel Jackson early on in his career.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, that's
like
crazy.
A disgruntled dead person.
Yeah. But yeah, he sees his friend. He's playing cards.
Yeah.
And he says like, "Oh, are we both having the same dreams?" I'm not dreaming.
Yeah, and that's he's then awakened from the dream, and he hears the phone rings.
So he has to sew around his neck as well.
Yeah, and then he wakes up and he gets a phone call, and we don't listen to what's being said on the phone call, but we know what's being said. He's being told there's been another murder, and it's your friend.
Yeah.
You need to come to the hospital.
And that's what he's had all the blood. The only bit of blood that was left was used to write "It's a Wonderful Life" on the wall.
Wonderful.
With two, I was going to say, like, yeah, two L's, like the Gemini killer would do. He'd often misspell certain words with two L's.
Yeah.
Again, we don't need to see it, but we know, and we can feel it through George C. Scott's performance, that he is breaking down. And he has so many moments just of random outbursts. I think one of my favourite moments in the film is when this nurse, she is self-described in the film as a bitch. She says it. So, "Oh, it's in the file." He goes, "It is not in the file."
That would be in the file.
It is not In the file.
Just
Not.
it is not. And he keeps doing this throughout the film, just random little outbursts at the end of sentences, and I just really get a kick out of it.
There's another moment as well. I think like a nurse just like goes into the room where he's in. It's like, everything all right? He just turns round. Like, we're fine.
Fine.
Make a lot of people nervous.
Only sinners.
Everybody.
Is everything all right in here, guys?
We're fine.
All right.
It's all right.
Sorry for asking, George C. Scott. So
It is
sorry.
not.
It's a file.
Apparently, Brad Dourif said he was great to work with. He was very funny.
Apparently, yeah, it's just these really like weird moments of anger, and I totally get it. Like, he's under pressure, he's cracking up. His best friend has just been brutally murdered,
And he seems to be the only person who cares.
yeah,
This hospital just seems to keep going.
yeah.
Like nothing's happened.
I really, you said earlier, maybe one of the reasons I'm drawn to this film is because it's very X-Files episode-esque. I totally agree with that. I also, I love police procedural stuff. I love police investigative films, and this is that. You know, Kinderman is our main character as the lead investigator, trying to piece together what the hell is going on. I love all of it. That dream vision sequence especially, it just makes me want to research piece of William Peter Blatty more.
We need to watch the Ninth Configuration, I think.
I do, yeah, we do. But it's like, if that is how, is that how that man like saw heaven? Is that?
Yeah. Or even like that. Well, that's like,
That intrigues me.
it was meant to be look like a train station
Yeah,
because we had like
yeah.
the board with like destinations. So
The 415 to elsewhere is now
Yeah.
departing.
that to me means that there's different places that people go, not just like one or the other. I think
Yeah.
there's different planes, which in a weird way could link back to some of the stuff that we were seeing in the second movie.
Yeah, potentially.
Like without trying. So I find that interesting, but it is a beautiful scene. One of my favorite scenes, just from a visual standpoint, it's right before the showdown. It's when it's kind of realized that the Gemini killer every day, as he will just go unconscious for a bit, but his brainwave activity goes through the roof, and he is possessing catatonic patients. So it takes over this elderly woman who kills a nurse, takes a uniform. We see her crawling over the ceiling above George C. Scott, which was really well done, and
Scary.
you can see that they just replicated the ceiling on the ground, had her crawl over it, and you can kind of see a matte line, because you can see there's an area where he doesn't walk, and it's the divide between the wall and the ceiling. At no point with the camera angle looking up does he ever cross it. I'm like, I think that's where they've cut it off. But it's literally just two elements filmed and put together. There's one where she's like right behind him, like, how did they do that one? But it looks really cool. So then she goes off to his house, Kinnaman's house, and he's been avoiding home because his mother-in-law is there and is baking a carp, which has been living in his bathtub, which is that whole side story.
Bath for 3 days.
So he gets in a police car, chase her down to his home. They get there, and apparently as soon as she arrived, she just kind of passed out. So they kind of place her in a chair, like, cause they were expecting a nurse.
Yeah.
And then suddenly she starts speaking to him with Brad Dourif's voice. Takes the shears out and goes for his daughter. And I think the mother grabs her just the last second when they clap.
Catatonics are so easy to possess. I've been waiting for you, Lieutenant. I wanted you to see this.
Throws Kinnaman out there, throws the cop to the wall. I'm really glad they kept that in both versions
I think it's great.
of the film.
It is great. It's so unnerving.
It's something that if he was ever unsure that there was a supernatural element to this
Yeah.
he knows now there is, and it's what leads seamlessly into both versions of the ending. Because to me, that character, now that his family is in danger, and he's made it very clear, because he even says, we'll get her eventually, for him to then go into the cell and shoot the patient X makes total sense to me.
I love that moment with Dourif. I think it's in the director's cut. It might be in the theatrical one as well, but when he says to George C. Scott, "Oh, you are," and asking for an invitation to the dance.
Yeah.
Oh, you are issuing a clear invitation to the dance.
What does that mean?
Never mind.
Basically saying, "Oh, you want to get your family involved in this? Okay."
Yeah.
What I love about that whole old woman crawling on the ceiling business, and the nurse then the old lady disguising herself as a nurse going to the house and all of that. It might sound a bit random, like on paper, but the movie sets it up, and it actually sets it up in a few different ways. So there's a scene where Kinderman is in cell 11 and he's talking to the Gemini killer, and Kinderman just asks him, "How are you leaving your cell? How are you committing these murders?" And Gemini killer just kind of looks at him and he's like, "With the help of some old friends." It's like, okay. And then the police investigation reveals that each crime scene, so the little boy, the priest in the confessional booth, which is another really good scene, scary moment, and Father Dyer in the hospital, there's different fingerprints at each crime scene, and they realise that the prints match some of the elderly patients. But obviously the biggest spanner in the works is that these catatonic, senile patients could not possibly have committed these crimes. So I just love how that big moment with the old woman on the ceiling and then at the house, it's like, it's not just random, it's like there's been build up here.
So do you think he never actually leaves his cell?
No, I don't think he leaves at all.
Yeah.
It's all cyclical. It's all, it's all possession.
That makes it a very cool film.
Yeah.
Even even then leading into the theatrical ending, we've seen that he is quite powerful, and I can understand why they would then get an exorcist in to deal with it. I just wish it should either be a priest that had been more established in the film, or if it was an unknown, someone who has failed, and then they should have Kinnaman, kind of like at the end of The Conjuring, the person who's not ordained should have been the one to finish the exorcism. I think that would have been a much more powerful, especially if they included the fact that he's not Catholic.
Yeah.
Not even just not religious. He's Jewish. They could have done something really interesting there. And it visually is a nice sequence to watch.
Yeah.
Somewhere between these two endings would be great.
Yeah.
But overall, I do personally prefer this film to the original one.
I do as well. I'm not ashamed to say that either. I know people revere this Exorcist 3 very well. Again, I respect the first movie. Obviously, it's untouchable in terms of its influence and its legacy. It's just not a film for me. Like, I don't really go back to it that much. If The Heretic Exorcist 2 is just, that's that.
Arrow have done a remastered Blu-ray of that as well, if you don't want it. I have an incomplete trilogy here.
Yeah, but Exorcist 3, it's a more... I don't want to sound like a snob when I say this, but it's a more palatable movie. It's more rewatchable than The Exorcist.
I mean, look at the age ratings here. We're all going from 18 to a 15.
Yeah.
This is not a gory film.
No, not at all.
And I could put this on during the day.
Yeah.
And just chill out to it. There are elements of The Exorcist where I have never found this movie scary, but there is stuff that's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's not a casual watch.
It's an interesting...
It's not necessarily casual, but it's easier.
It's an interesting one with religious horror, because I guess when you are dealing with themes of possession, there is a debate, I suppose, that you can make of, is it only scary if you genuinely believe in the things that the film is espousing? Can you only really find The Exorcist scary if you are religious yourself? And I think to an extent that's kind of true, but when I watch The Exorcist 3, there is just something unnerving throughout the whole movie. It's like, I don't know where it's going. I don't like this idea that he's corrupting these old people to commit these murders, and that, they don't even know what's happening to them. And also just the idea that Father Karras has been trapped with the Gemini killer for 15 years,
and potentially bits of Pazuzu as well.
Yeah,
we find out in the director's cut that the Gemini killer is doing things. He is being told who to target, because his whole MO before death was random. But he on purpose pick people with K in their name.
Yes, and there was also other connection, because the little boy who's killed, his mother was involved in the original story. Like, she was part of I can't remember exactly what her role was, but they realised, she was involved somehow. The priest that's killed in the booth, confessional booth, he was the one that I think sent Karras to the house. It was his order or something. And then obviously Father Dyer was involved as well, and his middle name is Kevin.
Yeah.
So
there is
there's a larger connection.
It's a large revenge, and I think you can, if you include the heretic being part of it, they both kind of split off following different characters after the events of the first movie, and Karras is an important character in both of them, just by name in the second.
Yeah.
In the second film, I think they do kind of round off a complete story when you follow most people involved.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
But it shows that, like, Gemini Killer, he says that the first two, like, he had no choice. He had to do them. They were sending a message.
Yeah.
So he has a boss.
Yeah. He does.
And the boss is Pazuzu.
The boss, yes. Yeah, definitely. The master.
Yeah.
He calls him. It's a fantastic movie. It's the Exorcist franchise has got ups and downs for sure.
So many ups and downs.
So do so many horror franchises though. It's like it's very inconsistent. You know, the level of quality. But Exorcist 3 for me is where it's at. This is the top of the list in terms of Exorcist films.
Yeah, we never did get around to watching Believer.
No, we never did.
I know the one that we should have had by now, if the one was going to be called The Exorcist Deceiver, which I kind of like as a name. I think that's kind of cool. Who knows what's going to happen?
Well, isn't Mike Flanagan working on an Exorcist?
Potentially.
Interesting.
This seems to change every few months, and I think because Universal paid $400 million for the rights to The Exorcist to do this, add then the production of the movie, which it's Blumhouse, so I can't imagine it was insanely expensive. But that basically means that by the end of this trilogy, because I think they only got the rights to make 3 films, they have to make it worthwhile. This has to become a $1 billion trilogy, and that first movie did not do well.
I think also just comparing arguably the two, you know, the highest regarded films in the Exorcist franchise, which obviously is the first one and the third one. I think of them, and it's interesting that the two most successful ones are very different from each other. It's like, yes, the first one is gory, it's visceral, it's uncomfortable. The third one
is a thinker.
It's a police investigation into a serial killer. It's a very different thing altogether, and I really think that's the key to sequels. You got to do something different. Poltergeist 3, it went AWOL.
All right. I do have to say though, you cannot tell me that The Exorcist 2, The Heretic, didn't do something different.
It did something different. It was not executed well.
Yeah.
At all.
I mean, there's elements of that movie that we liked.
Not yeah.
And it's pretty stylish in many parts.
It is. Yeah.
That is a video for another day.
Yeah.
The thing is, I don't think we'd shit on it as much as most do.
No.
We know it's not a good movie, but I think there are some really interesting talking points and visuals that I would really like to talk through at some point.
The ending of Heretic is fun to watch.
Yeah. But obviously, it says something that we then watch this and then decided we're skipping over the first two films and we're just going to do a video straight on the third one.
Yeah.
Because this, to me, is the best Exorcist film.
Yeah. Well, it's...
Personally.
Bill, now! Shoot now! Kill me now!
If Blassie had had his way, we probably wouldn't be comparing them at all because
it would have been a separate film entirely.
It wouldn't have been a sequel.
It would have just been called Legion.
Yeah.
And probably, I think at the very most, it would have been set in the same world, especially considering it does have the same characters. Yeah. So have you got any more notes on this one?
I made so many notes for this, but actually I think we've got through all of them. Yeah, I think this is... It's a brilliant film. It is a thinker, but the performances alone really enhance it. And I'm sorry for Brad Dourif that he did not get copious awards for this.
Or for anything like throughout the rest of his career.
I know.
I still love that the only thing he still does now is voice Chucky.
We met him.
And we met him, we met him last year.
We met him.
And his daughter.
Yeah, it was great.
That was cool. Thanks for listening, guys. We know probably, I don't know how controversial it is about us saying that we're not that arsed by the first Exorcist, but hey, we're allowed different opinions. We'll probably talk on it one day because we do have both cuts there, and I'm not even sure which cut it is that I've seen.
Yeah.
So we'll find out. I also like to shout out our channel members because those guys, I like to show my appreciation to them. Yeah, they're awesome.
They are awesome. Thank you. We love you.
Thanks a lot, guys. Let us know which is your favourite of the Exorcist films. Specifically, I'm going to say specifically the sequels. Has anyone seen Believer? Is it worth us checking out? It's been on Now TV for months, and I just haven't got the heart to watch watch it. So thanks a lot, everybody, and we will see you when we see you.